is a wound deeper than rejection. Rejection says, I did not choose you. Rejectability says, you were never built to be chosen. That is the pain Frankenstein still carries, not because the creature is mindless, but because it is aware, it feels, it hopes, it learns, it reaches out, and the world answers with horror. That is what makes the story unbearable. The creature is not punished for cruelty, it is punished for existence. It wakes up already judged, already classified, already exiled from the category of the lovable. And that is why the novel still works on us, because many people do not only fear being left, they fear being seen and found fundamentally wrong. They fear that if someone looks closely enough, they will discover that love is not something they lost, but something that was never meant for them. That fear is older than romance, older than heartbreak, older than memory. It is the fear of being assembled incorrectly and then asked to live as if nothing is missing. The creature's horror is not that it is ugly, its horror is that it is conscious enough to know what ugliness has cost it. Most versions of the story turn the creature into a simple monster. That makes the tale easier to digest. If the creature is stupid, then the problem is easy. You can fear it, fight it, kill it, and feel clean again. But Mary Shelley's real creation is far more disturbing. The creature is intelligent. It teaches itself language. It teaches itself history. It teaches itself desire. It watches a family from hiding and learns tenderness by proximity. It gathers firewood for people who would never thank it. It learns to hope in secret, because hope is the first thing a lonely mind does when it has no one to reflect it back. And that is where the story becomes a mirror. The creature is not only asking, why does the world hate me? It is asking, what kind of person do I become after being hated this long? That question is not limited to literature. It is the psychology of every child who grows up feeling like a burden, every adult who smiles while expecting rejection, every person who walks into a room already convinced that the room has made up its mind about them. The creature does not begin as evil. It becomes dangerous after it has been denied every form of belonging. And that is the part people do not want to admit. A neglected soul does not stay innocent forever, not because it is born wicked, but because a heart that is starved long enough begins to twist itself just to survive. Love does not only heal, the absence of love also shapes. It shapes sharply, it shapes cruelly, and sometimes what looks like malice is only pain that has learned to wear armor. That is why Frankenstein is not just about a monster.
It is about the psychology of being seen as monstrous. Once a person is marked that way, everything they do gets reinterpreted through the label. A kindness becomes suspicious, a plea becomes manipulation, a silence becomes threat. The label comes first, and the behavior gets forced to fit it. That is the tragedy Shelley understood so young. She knew that the world does not always wait for proof before it decides what something is. It often begins with appearance, then builds a story, then calls the story truth. The creature lives inside that machine. It is not loved because it is not allowed to become more than the first impression. It is not welcomed because fear has already written the ending before the plot begins. That same logic still runs through human life. People are reduced to one moment, one flaw, one appearance, one rumor, one wound, one accent, one body, one mistake. And once reduced, they are expected to behave as though reduction is not happening. They are expected to be graceful under misrecognition, pleasant under humiliation, stable under shame. But shame is never neutral. Shame changes behavior. It changes posture. It changes voice. It changes the future. The creature's violence is not excused by this fact, but it becomes legible. It becomes psychologically real. It is what happens when a living being is told over and over that it is an error. At some point, the mind stops asking for welcome and starts asking for revenge. Not because revenge is noble, but because pain that cannot be witnessed often tries to make itself visible by force. And that is the final blow of the story. The creature is not empty. It is not foolish. It is not incapable of love. It is full of love until the world trains that love into grief, and then into rage, and then into ruin. That is why the novel is still terrifying. It asks a question most people avoid their entire lives. What if the thing I call my personality is actually just a survival shape built around old rejection? What if what I call confidence is only armor? What if what I call anger is only grief that no one held long enough? The creature is a warning and a confession at the same time. It warns that when you deny someone belonging, you do not erase their need. You distort it. You deform it. You make it dangerous. dangerous. And it confesses that even the most abandoned heart still wants the same thing everybody wants: to be looked at without disgust, to be known without panic, to be touched without retreat, to be recognized as someone worth staying for. That is why Frankenstein endures, not because of lightning, and not because of the laboratory, and not because of the body stitched together from dead parts. It endures because it names the oldest wound in human life: the fear that maybe the problem is not that we have been rejected. Maybe the problem is that somewhere deep inside, we have already accepted the verdict that we were unworthy of love.
And once that verdict takes root, every room becomes a courtroom, every face becomes a judge, and every silence sounds like proof. The creature is what that pain looks like when it finally learns to speak. If I become more attractive, then I will deserve love. If I become more useful, then I will be chosen. If I become less difficult, less needy, less visible, then maybe I will finally be safe. That is the trap. The creature lives inside that logic too. It learns that being good is not enough, because goodness is not what the world is rewarding. The world is rewarding appearances, comfort, and belonging to the right category. So the wounded mind starts negotiating with itself. It says, maybe I am not lovable yet. Maybe if I keep improving, the verdict will change. But the verdict rarely changes, because the wound is not being judged by reality. It is being judged by fear, and fear is never satisfied. It keeps demanding a little more proof, a little more polish, a little more silence. That is how a person becomes their own Victor Frankenstein, assembling a self out of parts they think the world will accept, then rejecting the whole thing as soon as it shows signs of life. The cure is not perfection. The cure is to stop confusing performance with worth, to admit that love was never meant to be earned by becoming unrecognizable. And once that illusion collapses, the pain changes shape. It is no longer just sadness. It becomes grief for a life spent auditioning for a love that should never have been conditional in the first place. That is the real wound behind the creature, and behind so many human lives. The belief that if we can just become flawless enough, quiet enough, useful enough, beautiful enough, then maybe we will finally be allowed to exist without apology. But existence was never supposed to require an audition. The creature's suffering shows what happens when a being is forced to justify its own presence again and again. Eventually, it begins to hate the very need to justify itself. It starts to believe that wanting love is childish, that needing closeness is weakness, that asking to be seen is dangerous. So it hides, hardens, performs, and slowly becomes a stranger to its own longing. That is how unlovableness takes root, not when love is absent once, but when absence becomes the pattern, and the pattern becomes identity. Frankenstein matters because it names this process without softening it. It tells the truth that many people spend their whole lives avoiding. Some hearts do not become cold because they were born that way. They become cold because they were left out in the dark too long.